Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I'm your host Jakel, the world's worst YouTuber, and today I have a question for you. How would you feel personally if you came to find out after the fact that somebody with over 1 million more subscribers than you wound up utilizing your content without your knowledge or permission? That is exactly what we've come to talk about here today, because Funky Frogbait, who has 1.58 million subscribers over on their YouTube channel, just uploaded a video earlier today being the 22nd of March 2024, saying WitchTok has gone too far. Now, for those of you who are unaware, most of what I do over on TikTok is talk about magic, occultism, witchcraft, and paganism. I try to cite my sources, I talk about my experiences, I talk about an idea, and I do my best to explain the metaphysics behind a thing. I also talk about my first-hand direct experiences. But I'll say it before, I will say it again. I am not an educator. I am an entertainer. I have repeated this over and over and over. I am an autistic person, and these are my special interests. Now, it is in one of these videos where earlier today, March the 22nd of 2024, where I received a comment stating as follows, "This is so delusional." Now, in that video, I am talking a little bit about my experience working with the pop culture deity of Itachi Uchiha. Now, in this video, I'm not just talking about some obscure fantastical daydream. I talk about chaos magic, which is explained in very good detail in this book here, Liber Null, which is a dual volume with Psychonaut. Now, it wouldn't be until later adaptations of chaos magic where egregores and pop culture entities would be implemented, but in the video where I received this comment from, I was explaining the mechanism behind how pop culture deities function, that they are a type of thought form referred to as an egregore, and I share a little bit of my experience. Now, I am not unfamiliar with being referred to as delusional, but this particular comment came across me when I was having a particularly rough day. So I made a comment response video, and that response video looked like this.
You want to know what's absolutely delusional? Is thinking that you know what delusional is when you're probably not a therapist and you're probably not experienced in any of these things, and really you're just a big fat ableist, because we're talking about magic and we're talking about spirits and spirituality, and we're talking about things that have been written about, things that people have books written about these topics, and things that are part of traditions that are cultural, and maybe utilizing pop culture magic in order to do things that are in line with anime and manga is a little progressive and is a little modern and contemporary for some people. But you want to know what's fucking delusional? Is that you get a right to tell people what is and what isn't delusional. Like, oh my god, who put your big boy britches on this morning? Who put the big girl wanderoos onto your tuchus and made you think that you get to say things like that? Apparently your own goddamn audacity. Oh boy, you're getting blocked.
And it was in the comments of that response video where one of my regulars informed me that the video that other comment came from was featured in a video put out earlier today by Funky Frogbait, who is coming in at 1.58 million subscribers with, at this point of my filming, 149 videos. And in their video today, WitchTok has gone too far, there I am, and there is that video. Now, for this part, I want to do a bit of a reaction style video, because you will see quickly one of the many reasons I refer to myself as the world's worst YouTuber, and that is because the quality isn't always phenomenal, and I am working with what I got. But here we are at Funky Frogbait's page. We're on their channel, and here we are at the WitchTok has gone too far video. Now, if you'll excuse me, we're going to go ahead and jump to the part in the video where my video is featured. Now, I feel it is fair at this point that we start at the beginning of the section and the segment which I am featured, so we can sort of cover it as best as we can, at least up until the point my video is featured.
Interesting byproduct of the convergence of social media and spirituality is a recent contentious offshoot of paganism that worships pop culture deities.
Funny you should mention that because I work with Hatsune Miku, so that happens quite a lot.
What was it like working with Itachi Uchiha as a pop culture deity? In a magical and astral sense, my eyes looked like they had unlocked the Sharingan. And directly in front of me, I saw a PK manifestation of Itachi Uchiha.
Where were we? Pop culture
Let's take a moment to actually present my video that was featured in this one. That way we can see the thing in its entirety, so we can actually provide the context that was left on the cutting room floor in Funky Frog Bait's video. Now, for the sake of time, I am going to speed up that video because it is kind of a lengthier one, but I'm not going to speed it up too far that it is unable to understand. Let's get to it.
What was it like working with Itachi Uchiha as a pop culture deity? Let's go ahead and talk about it. First of all, in this video I did say Sasuke. I misspoke. Secondly, working with pop culture deities is entirely valid, but let's get into the metaphysics of it. The concept that makes the idea of pop culture deities even possible is the concept of egregores. Egregores are a specific type of thought form, not too different from tulpas, PK manifestations, many a poltergeist haunting. Egregores are created out of a belief of something. I have a social media following, so there is an egregore about me. There is a Jakel egregore, based on my social media presence and the lore about myself I've set forth here. Celebrities, presidents, prime ministers, they also have egregores about them. Then the concept of egregores was brought to chaos magic. A lot of the chaos magicians wind up being the shitposters of the occult world, because in many ways, chaos magic taps into the ridiculousness that is occult study and practice. So if there's an egregore about people, conversely, there's an egregore about fictitious characters. In many ways, egregores were introduced as a way to embody an archetype. You like the character of Superman. Use meditation, study on the character, as well as alter states of consciousness, in order to embody the traits of Superman. And this is the way that I initially started working with Itachi Uchiha. Itachi Uchiha is easily my favorite character in all Naruto. So I went back over and hyperfixated on Itachi Uchiha. I went back over his lore, his story, him as a character, the way that he interacted with others, his mission and purpose in the story. But the thing that fascinated me the most was the Sharingan. Oh, I fucking love this filter. Something that's fascinated me in magic in general is dream work. Conversely, hallucinations, illusions, delusions. My initial reason for wanting to learn about the Sharingan was to find a way to reverse engineer it and figure out how I can make it work for me. Did I actually unlock the Sharingan? No. But I did use a very chaos magic approach to it in order to understand it, reverse engineer it, and figure out how to make that shit work for me. I kept trying over and over and over, and then finally, I redirected my own energy toward my eyes, and then it happened. In a magical and astral sense, my eyes looked like they had unlocked the Sharingan. And directly in front of me, I saw a PK manifestation of Itachi Uchiha. The objective to learn the Sharingan was to be able to see through and detect what was a delusion, hallucination, etc. If I had been magically induced with some sort of real-life genjutsu, I would have used my Sharingan in order to get out of it. And in spite of that, I still saw Itachi standing directly in front of me in an altered state of consciousness that I accessed through meditation in order to be basically perceiving an astral space. So allowing myself to suspend my disbelief for just a moment, I sat down and I talked to him. Not too different from the way that I would talk to any of the other deities that are in my practice. I had come to realize that the egregore of Itachi Uchiha was actually helping me and guiding me the entire time to figure it out. And now that in some weird metaphysical way I had unlocked my own Sharingan, he helped me figure out how to use it. All I can really say is truth is stranger than fiction. And ultimately, this is one of the reasons why I really enjoy chaos magic and pop culture magic, because I think, as far as I am aware, it is only through these things that I would have been able to stumble upon this. But then that made me wonder, of all the times that I was trying to embody the traits of a doctor from Doctor Who, the times that I've obsessed over and taken inspiration from John Constantine, did that mean then that those egregores were with me, guiding me in some way? Personally, I prefer when my magical practice always leaves me with questions, because that means that there's always something for me to learn. There's always some new horizon for me to explore. And if my practice and my own lived experience makes me challenge my own beliefs, then it stands to reason that by sharing those experiences, others' beliefs will be challenged, and we can continue to push the envelope on what is possible in magical practice. All in all, pop culture deities are incredibly valid and incredibly real. And if you don't vibe with it, hey, that's cool. It doesn't have to be a part of your practice. But personally, I prefer when mine is a little bit bonkers from time to time. If you're still here, thanks for listening. As always, take care and much love.
Now, as you can see, there was a lot, and I mean a lot, of my original video that was left out of Funky Frog Bait's video, and it seems to me that it was deliberately presented in such a way to make it seem like I myself and the content that I was presenting was disingenuous at best or unhinged and delusional at worst. Now, what bothers me more than my video being taken out of context in that segment is that the other person that was being represented in that video, who says that they work with Hatsune Miku, has already faced incredible criticism, backlash, slander, and even death threats from within our own witchcraft community. And then to see this pop up again in something that is completely disconnected from the WitchTok community at large is incredibly frustrating and is probably the main reason why I am made so frustrated with this video in and of itself. Now, I myself have been uploading to the witchy side of TikTok since May of 2021, and throughout the majority of the time that I've been uploading there, I've been taking on popular narratives, problematic points of view, and just all around talking about theory, how I think things work, trying to present cultural, historical, and religious context to the best of my ability, because these waters out here are treacherous. And even in spite of the way that things get represented or misrepresented in social media, I ultimately conclude that social media may not be the best place for somebody to be talking about their spiritual practice. It may not be the best place for people to be talking about the things that are intangible and ineffable, and it's really difficult to talk about things that sound to the outside observer to be unsound of mind. And because it sounds so off-kilter and it makes somebody sound delusional, sometimes isn't always the best time to be talking about it. There are 3 videos that I have here that I can think of off the top of my head where I've taken up my personal grievances with the WitchTok community as a whole. First of all, where I say back in March of 2020, I'm leaving WitchTok. Then secondly, at the beginning of 2023, My Liminal Hell, where I talk a little bit about how I got canceled for sharing a 2-month-long non-stop daily interaction saga. And a huge part of the reason why I took it upon myself to commit to that storytelling implement was because I myself was fed up with a lot of the problematic elements and the genuinely discouraging and disheartening things that are shared in WitchTok as a whole. And then 3, one of the ones most recently that I uploaded, the WitchTokers are coming, talking about how with the imminent TikTok ban, there are going to be a migration of WitchTokers coming from TikTok and coming over to YouTube. And that is going to affect and impact the WitchTok and occult, or the witchcraft and occult community here on this platform, YouTube. Historically speaking, I have had a love-hate relationship with WitchTok because I myself have taken on points of view, talking points, and sentiments, discourse, and narrative to such an extent where I have spent a lot of time and effort arguing with people. Either while it's taking on an idea or a philosophy, or it is taking on individual people. Because in spite of the things that I have presented that I consider to be cultural, historical, and religious context, it has been shoved to the side and ignored, and a lot of my content just is with arguing people on WitchTok about witchcraft, paganism, and occultism. Criticisms, complaints, and grievances of WitchTok as a whole are incredibly valid. They are well-founded, and I think it is silly and asinine to not criticize a lot of these things. And even in the video that I'm referencing here by Funky Frogbait, a lot of the things that they go over in their video are things that I myself have complained about and shared my grievances with. The entirety of a thing is worth criticism. My problem is that people have been singled out. People with their usernames and handles on the downloaded video have been taken without the knowledge or consent of people. And now this is funneling back into those content creators' small or large pages for all I know, and this is going to perpetuate the cycle of toxic behavior in our community and from other communities now looking at us, and instead of talking about WitchTok as a whole, as we did with when headlines were being made about witches hexing the moon, now people are being singled out. Now people's criticism, ire, and ridicule can be focused on individuals, and that is an entire fucking problem. Now, before I continue on, I feel like it would be important to react to some parts of this video, because I feel like it will help others understand where I'm coming from with some of the things that I'm wanting to say later in my video here. With that being said, even though this video by Funky Frogbait is only 17 minutes and 16 seconds, I don't think that I'm going to react to the whole thing. So I encourage you, dear viewer, to go ahead and watch the original thing in its entirety. That way you can get an opinion for yourself without my bias painting the entire experience. Now, I feel it is also important to note, I am not going to tolerate any kind of transphobia or homophobia on my page in my comments. I myself am a trans feminine non-binary person. That's not what this video is about. So with that being said, I think now we can finally get into it. Let's go. Let's start from the top.
Witchcraft is an ancient practice that spans countless cultures and centuries. But what happens when magic meets modernity and
I do support this content creator's rhetorical goals, to borrow a few phrases from Dan McClellan. However, there is something that I want to point out here. Witchcraft in and of itself is an umbrella term. Most people that we now look back in the past and refer to as witches probably would not have called themselves witches. By and large, witchcraft as we understand it today is a collection of multiple different folk practices from multiple different countries, regions, religions, and cultures. There are some things that, although it looks witchy, isn't exactly witchy, and therefore it would be unfair to call it witchcraft. All of this being said, we also need to include that our modern purview of witchcraft mostly comes from the neo-pagan movement that still exists to this day, but mostly started and caught wind between the mid-1800s to the mid-1900s, which is where we get a lot of the cool stuff, such as Wicca and other forms of neo-paganism, which is how we have an introduction to a lot of the gods that are very popular in the WitchTok and WitchTok adjacent communities in the social media zeitgeist. Oftentimes, the reason that people were accused of witchcraft and therefore associated as a witch was to oust them and do away with them either by force or by choice, taking them to meet the afterlife. This is in direct reference to the European as well as the Salem witch trials, and although I understand why Funky Frogbait did not include all of that in this video, I feel like it is important to note here. If we refer to all witchcraft as the same thing, we are already off on the wrong foot. Let's continue.
tradition meets TikTok. The online WitchTok community is no stranger to toil and trouble with as many hoaxes as there are hexes, so...
Real quick, a lot of the hoaxes, such as the main two that I can think of, well, let's include three, whether it was hexing the moon, hexing the fae, or the priest of Zenithros, these are main hoaxes that are referred to as historical to the WitchTok community. The thing is, they were hoaxes, not started by witches or witch talkers. These were ideas that were presented to WitchTok in order to see what WitchTok would do, and a lot of people in the WitchTok community followed suit, reacting exactly the way that people thought that they would. Point is, I don't think it's fair to say that witches are the proprietors of some of these major hoaxes, when in fact it came from outside the community and then affected the community as a whole. But it is important to note that in response to these hoaxes, a lot of witches did show some very interesting colors in the process.
The question is, are you a good witch or a bad witch? I'm going to preface this video by saying we are not going to be addressing the question of whether or not magic is real. I used to believe that a certain type of cracker was more holy than other types of crackers, so...
Now, this part really stood out to me. Now, just as a quick disclaimer, the only way that I have any knowledge or information on this particular content creator is by the way that they have graced my For You page frequently or infrequently on TikTok, because they do have a sizable TikTok following as well. That being said, I don't know much of anything about them. I don't know what their values are. I don't know them as a person. I am going in as blind as most people could. So this is not a reflection of this person as an individual, but when other people use statements like this, such as, I myself used to think that some crackers were holier than others, it winds up being a way to say, I too have believed in silly things. but I have matured past those silly things, and it places them in a position to have a sense of superiority to where they are much more free to criticize and ridicule the things that they deem to be a lot more silly, because they themselves have matured and grown out of a lot of the silly thinking. I'm not sure if that's exactly what this person is trying to do, but in other instances, that's exactly what this type of dialogue establishes.
I don't really think I'm in the position to judge people for what they believe. However, I do think there are a lot of fascinating questions and concerns surrounding the content that many witches, pagans, and spiritualists post to TikTok.
I would genuinely agree.
Go fish. For instance, many
To me, using tarot cards and then saying go fish feels very insulting and downright demeaning. Because tarot, even though it is presented in some very silly ways on the internet, is a long-standing tradition that has many different takes. It's been introduced to many different cultures. Many different schools of thought have introduced their own ideas into tarot, which is how we get our understanding of tarot that we have today. I think it is easier to criticize, analyze, and even downright ridicule some of the ways that people implement tarot on social media. That felt very condescending, though.
witches, instead of studying scrolls, seem to be more interested in keeping people from scrolling, threatening
Although I understand the play on words, more interested in stopping people from scrolling as opposed to learning from scrolls, I myself have quite the sizable occult library, either here in my own collection. You know what, we're going to go ahead and stop this video, and I'm going to insert a little clip of me showing off my own collection. Now here is my bookshelf. This top portion up here is mostly manga, and right down here is where I have most of my witchy references. Yes, I do have some pop culture stuff over here, but that's because it won't fit on the smaller, shorter shelf up here. Starting over here with the Kybalion, we've got Bitchcraft, Witchcraft, The Joy of Hex, Power of Hex, Hecate, Liminal Rites, The Crooked Path, Of Blood and Bones, Libernal and Psychonaut, The Witch's Guide to the Paranormal, Hex Twisting, The Black Arts, Hades, American Brujeria, and La Santa Muerta, as I have acquired in an attempt to reconnect to my own ancestors. Got a couple of volumes on psychic vampirism. Then we've got Greek and Roman necromancy, poisonous plants, and numerology. Now, these things together aren't my main collection. However, they are the ones that I am either working on or use for quick reference. And if we follow this way into the closet, I have plenty more. Pardon the mess. Over here is where I keep the rest of my books that I consider to be helpful resources. This is most of the rest of my collection. This we just put in here because this closet, this section up here, I like to have ready and available to go, most of it being either the study of the culture or the mythology itself. I've got a couple of volumes by Crowley. I've got the Dictionary of Demons, quite a few on ancient Egypt. Plenty of different things I've got up here. Some of them more in the realm of pop culture with the Necronomicon here. And I also have the Simon Necronomicon over here, right next to the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey. All of this is to say, mostly, not to show off my knowledge and prowess, but to say that this is a very humble and small collection compared to the incredible occult libraries that many of the witches who take themselves seriously on the platform have. This is small compared to the collections that others have. So, by saying that witches are more focused on stopping people from scrolling as opposed to studying scrolls, we ain't got scrolls anymore. Very condescending in my opinion, and very demeaning to the well-intentioned people. That I am going to get to later on in the video. There is one more thought that I have before we turn it back to the video. I do have a copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls. However, it is presented in book format. I also have a copy of the Gospel of Judas, which was originally in a scroll format, alongside some of the other Gnostic Gospels. This is a part of my collection where I have multiple different translations of the Bible and some of the lost scriptures of the Bible that were never going to be included in the Bible to begin with, because I myself study and practice something that I call Christian occultism. So, it's not fair to suggest that witches study scrolls. And I don't think that is what this content creator was trying to imply, but it is a broad generalization that paints a misinformed picture to those who are viewing this video, who aren't a part of the community, who aren't witches themselves, and it misrepresents the entire thing in broad, swooping strokes. Back to the video.
Fortune if they don't engage. Of course, TikTok card readings tend to be suspiciously dramatic. It's always a friend preying on your downfall, or an ex-lover who wants you back, and never anything useful. Like, hey, your inspection sticker is about to expire, or something.
I don't give a f if you don't believe in tarot readings. This video found you for a f***ing reason.
Damn, girl! Okay. Now, I'm not 100% sure how these online tarot readings even work. Maybe the coven in the comment section could explain this, because my understanding was that a reading is supposed to be a very individual experience.
I'm going to stop it right there. For the most part, by and large, I agree with what they are saying. I agree with the sentiments where a lot of the tarot readings that wind up being on the WitchTok hashtag are very hollow, disingenuous, very hokey and scammy. But this also demonstrates to me that this content creator is not informed on what actually goes on in the WitchTok community. There are a lot of witches, pagans, and occultists who are also equally fed up, if not downright enraged, by the fact that these silly, misleading, disingenuous, and contrived tarot readings are so popular and so far-reaching, it misrepresents the community as a whole. We, as a community, witches, pagans, and occultists, and whatever else you want to call yourself who is a magical practitioner on that particular platform, we're frustrated, we're fed up. But this is a problem with the algorithm, not necessarily with the community. However, wherever there is a community, there are going to be scammers. Wherever there is a market, people are going to put their bid in. And a lot of the people who are doing this, these contrived tarot readings, are really mucking it up for everybody else. And I feel like this being a point in this video really demonstrates why we, as witches and pagans, are very frustrated with that, because it misrepresents the community as a whole, and now people have the wrong idea about those who take ourselves very seriously, those who are actually dedicated to our craft, and those who are actually trying to apply ourselves to develop as not just witches and practitioners, but as people, as individuals. This takes away from all of that. So I agree with them. However, the coven in the chat, in the comments, to me, I'm biased. I will admit, I want to try and state that from the top. But I feel, again, that it's very condescending. It's giving this air, this idea that although I'm not judging you, I'm still going to ridicule you. I'm still going to talk down to you. And again, this is coming from a point of view where I don't understand this person as an individual, as a person. I don't know who they are as a person. All I know is a few TikToks that I've seen while scrolling my For You page and this video. It just feels very unreasonably critical. Moving on.
The posters always insist that if you see their video on your For You page, the reading is meant for you. Well,
again,
you and the other 851,500 people summoned by the almighty algorithm.
You will marry this man in the year 2024, and it will be the best day of your life. And your friends will be very jealous of you. Please reply with, I do in the comments to confirm the truth. truth of this prophecy.
I receive in Jesus' name, amen. I receive in Jesus' name. What kind of dystopian nightmare is this? We've got AI grannies giving out prophecies before GTA 6?
Yeah, no, it's bullshit. I agree. It's silly. But it ruins the entire thing for everybody, because that's what people see, and then the entire community as a whole gets judged by the things that even we as a community are judging. I don't think that content creator here was aware of that. But because they weren't aware of that, that sets the trajectory for this entire video to be very misleading. And with 1.58 million subscribers, it's important that context gets provided. Let's move on to the next point, because we're coming right back to the pop culture thing. Here we go.
Another interesting byproduct of the convergence of social media and spirituality is a recent contentious offshoot of paganism that worships pop culture deities.
Funny you should mention that because I work with Hatsune Miku, so that happens quite a lot.
What was it like working with Itachi Uchiha as a pop culture deity? In a magical and astral sense, my eyes looked like they had unlocked the Sharingan. And directly in front of me, I saw a PK manifestation of Itachi Uchiha. Alright, I guess we're getting an ad. Pause? Now taking Jujutsu Kaisen characters and making them kiss.
Where were we? Pop culture.
That is, first and foremost, my video was taken drastically out of context, as I myself have already stated and demonstrated earlier in this video. My video that was presented here was cut up, chopped up, misrepresented, and it painted an unfair picture. And with that being said, the other content creator that we just saw, who is again going to get ridiculed even further in this segment of this video, they already have received backlash. They already have been given all kinds of crap that they don't deserve. And now somebody else is coming out of nowhere, scooping up their content just for that cycle to start all over again. It's unfair. And it presents a bad sentiment, and already this part is in bad faith. Because although it is a contentious point, it's not a byproduct of paganism. As stated before, this pop culture deity thing is very much something that started in chaos magic. Chaos magic has its own school of thought, and there are multiple people that have talked about it. Now, contrary to popular belief, it has nothing to do with actually using chaos. It has everything to do with, at the point in which it was being written about at first, starting mostly contributed to Austin Spare, who was one of the forefathers of sigil magic or sigilmancy, later then to be expounded upon by Peter Carroll in Psychonaut / Liber Then you have later authors such as Phil Hine with Condensed Chaos. There are actual reputable books, and in my opinion, chaos magic really is the next frontier, because it's exploring what can magic do, what can we do with magic if it is not set up in the confines of ancient tradition. And a lot of this came to fruition as a result of orders like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Ordo Templo Orientis, the Theosophic Society. Groups like this were very members only. Even Gerald Gardner's original Wicca coven was initiation only. These very secluded, very exclusionary, members only pagan and magical groups that were keeping very hush-hush about certain magical topics. These individuals who brought the ideas of chaos magic together really took these ideas at a surface level and tried to implement them by talking about sigils, talking about the cone of power, talking about protections and grounding yourself, and then later on introducing the idea of utilizing transcendental meditations as well as trance-like states, as well as altered states of consciousness in order to get to a magical frame of mind. And this is how egregores, which is a type of thought form, gets introduced to the mix. Now, for those of you who are familiar with more of the paranormal investigation route, we might be familiar with words such as PK manifestation, which PK is short for psychokinetic manifestation. This roots most primarily in the spiritualism movement, which cropped up right around the same time as neo-paganism. Spiritualism really took this idea that psychic inclination is something that can be gifted to anybody, and anybody can develop these psychic gifts, but some people are born with a little bit more spiritual sensitivity. And although spiritualism have given us a lot of the same problems that we're facing in WitchTok and other communities today, such as hokey, scammy types of services being produced, utilizing parlor tricks, something that Harry Houdini himself very much went out of his way to go in disguise to crash spiritualist seances. And he even had an assistant who he gave a secret word to that should, after his passing, somebody summon the spirit of Harry Houdini. His assistant was to go to that seance and say, you need the password. If you don't have the password, you're scamming people. Harry Houdini, also being a very famous escape artist, being very much in the world of stage magicians, he set the groundwork for people like, what the hell is his name? The Amazing Randy. That was his stage name because he was a stage magician. Fuck, I can't remember his name. It'll come to me as the course of this. James Randi. I think that's his name. He went on public television to debunk people like Uri Geller and other individuals who were scamming people. So there definitely is a similar vein of that scammy, hokey thing. And chaos magic cropped up in that point, and current paranormal investigation also in many ways was an answer to that spiritualism movement to try and debunk it and have a more, at least attempted, scientific mind about certain things. But paranormal investigation crops over with spiritualism a lot, which is how we have ideas like PK manifestations. PK manifestations are often posited as the source idea behind most poltergeist hauntings, where people who have some sort of psychic or spiritual sensitivity wind up having these festering emotions that then seep out of them, and that psychic energy charges that space to create its own sentient phantom, so to say. And then these PK manifestations will leech off of people to make those things happen again, to create the emotion that created that PK manifestation to begin with. And with enough power, they can cause hauntings that usually include things disappearing or moving from place to place, or things getting knocked over inexplicably. This all ties back to the same type of PK manifestation thought form. Something else that is also very popular in online spaces is the ideas of tulpas, something that originated in Tibetan practices, where people would sit in meditation together and put their concentrated thoughts into one idea and make some sort of psychic manifestation. Now, courtesy of the internet and other TV shows like Supernatural, the idea of tulpas has been far removed from its original context and become something much more than it ever was supposed to be. And in other occult spaces, we talk about servitors, an individual person making a thought form spiritual essence to carry out spiritual tasks for them while they are doing their magical task, and now this other thought form can go off and do the thing. This is a servitor. And now we have the idea of egregores. Egregores initially were something to introduce that weren't an external entity, but it was more of an archetype, a concept, an idea. It never was supposed to posit the idea that Superman or any of these comic book characters were external entities. But on that same notion, you have comic book creators, authors, illustrators, such as, what the fuck is his name? Bald, Scottish. He made the Invisibles. Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison also is a magical practitioner, and he really put forth this idea that comic book superheroes were the new form of a modern pantheon of magical deities and entities. It's not to say that these comic book personas actually exist outside of us, but it is to say that because there is a character made around them, and we have these ideas, and with enough people putting their focus in their idea and beliefs, they can become somewhat tangible. But it's not to say that you can sit there and sit and chit-chat with Superman. It is to say that if you focus on the ideas, the principles, the ideals, the concepts that Superman himself embodies, and you embody that within yourself, you then can become more like Superman. That does not mean that you're going to become invulnerable, invincible, able to move faster than a speeding bullet or jump over a skyscraper with a single bound. It's more about the principles and the ideals and the values of Superman. And by focusing on that egregore, you're now embodying the traits of Superman. And let's say it's not Superman, it's Batman. For God's sakes, why would you choose Batman if you already got some kind of trauma going on? Any of these characters in fiction can be utilized not necessarily as an external deity, but as an archetype in which we can take their values and embody them ourselves. Now, to move on with this, at some point, the idea of egregores got really extrapolated and compared across servitors, tulpas, and other PK manifestations to then suggest that they are very real entities outside of us, brought to life by mass belief. Rather, it is not the belief in them, but it is the psychic energy led to them that makes them a sentient external force. And because of this idea being posited, mostly in online spaces, it kind of got removed from its own context. It kind of got carried away with itself. So on top of that, it is very much a natural evolution of a spiritual concept, or how do I praise it? Put forth by the ideas online and expounded upon and extrapolated from something that originated in a very real, very practical and pragmatic magical practice, which is chaos magic. Maybe this would be a good point to stop this clip. That being said, as far-flung and long-winded as it was, there is an actual principle, an idea, a metaphysical theory that many people, not just on WitchTok, have been practicing for several decades at this point. And I understand why, taking a step back, having no knowledge of any of this other theory and conversation and discourse that went into it before the fact, I understand why it sounds silly and delusional. Hell, any of this shit to the outside observer, I try to remind my fellow witches, sounds bonkers and like madness to other people. I understand that it sounds delulu. But to hear something that you don't understand, and then ridicule it, and then ridiculing other people for believing in it, that's not a problem with the person who believes in it. That's a problem with the judgmental individuals who are then making their disbelief the problem of others. Let's continue on with this video.
Pagans are a small but very vocal community of practitioners that believe that the intense devotion of fan culture towards popular characters, celebrities, and icons has the power to create an autonomous psychic entity called an egregore. Come on, keep up. If people write enough filthy fan fiction or argue about headcanons in enough Tumblr threads, then this egregore feeding off all this scrum-diddly-umptious collective energy can grow more powerful and even ascend into a deity. All this to...
I don't know why this content creator is focusing on that other content creator. Why is this the content creator that they have chosen to focus on? The one that previously mentioned the Hatsune Miku or whatever her name is. Why is that a person that they're focusing on? That feels like a deliberate choice, as if this is one of those people that also ridiculed them and slandered them in the previous time that they were slandered and ridiculed before. Now, this is speculation, This is me inserting my own understanding and my own theory, and do not act like it is fact. Why is this the person having the foreknowledge I have about the way that that other content creator has been slandered, ridiculed, given death threats, being smeared all over, not just WitchTok, but outside of WitchTok and even on Reddit to such an extent that they already don't want to post content onto TikTok anymore? It feels like a dead horse is being revived to deliberately continue beating it. I'm not saying that this funky frog bait did that to that person previously, but it still feels like a deliberate choice to hyperfixate on one content creator.
Say, maybe Santa Claus does actually see you when you're sleeping and know when you're awake. Pop culture.
Again, if we are going with this egregorical construct theory, there's an egregore of Santa Claus. There is some spiritual rendition of Santa Claus that does fit the bill. That felt to me like deliberate condescension, which is already a bad faith argument, because it seems to me already that this person who is making this video that I'm reacting to clearly does not understand the implementation and the theory that came before to explain what this is. Anybody who believes in the egregore of Santa Claus does not believe in the real Santa Claus who lives in the North Pole, who comes to every child every Christmas Eve. That's not what is believed. It's being bombastic in order to get a rise out of other people, using other content creators as the source of ridicule. For some reason, this topic is the one that they seem to be misunderstanding the most and have the most investment to get their digs in.
Culture pagans often state that these egregores or deities directly interact with them, whether it's putting themselves on the worshipper's Pinterest feed.
So sometimes I'll ask an egregore to put themselves on my Pinterest.
What is being demonstrated here? It is a little off kilter, I'm not going to lie. And even if this is what this person that they are stealing their content from actually believes, maybe that's one of those thoughts that needs to remain an inside thought. To that extent, I will agree. Because in the very least, if you share this to the outside world, you're opening yourself up for ridicule.
Even though I haven't looked anything up about them on Pinterest yet. So I asked the Stallion to do it, and lo and behold, I kept scrolling, and then, bam, there he is.
I myself have professed to others before, usually in regards to other deities, such as when it came to King Asmodeus, who is a very prolific demon in every single Abrahamic faith. That deity, that demon, became very popular for a long time in 2021 and 2022. So when somebody asked me if I thought there was some metaphysical implement to suggest that King Asmodeus himself was directing the algorithm, I said no. King Asmodeus is a very popular entity at the moment. King Asmodeus is getting a lot of coverage. A lot of people are talking about King Asmodeus. I don't think that the spiritual entity took the algorithm and made you see what you needed to see. I think it's the algorithm. And this appears to be an individual who is asking the pop culture deity of Asterion, or whatever the name of the character is. I am so out of touch when it comes to video games. That character from Baldur's Gate 3. I don't think it's spiritual. I think it's the fact that that game was very popular, and on top of that, that is the most popular character from that game. I don't think it's spiritual. I think it's algorithmic.
or causing their games to glitch, because what else are they gonna do with all that spiritual time? Some will even claim that they have married one or more of these deities in an old controversial practice known as god spousing.
Surprise! I married a pop culture deity before I never told y'all. He came before Satan, he came before Loki, he came before Apollo. He was my first ever spouse.
Congratulations to the happy harem. As you might expect, many traditional pagans are absolutely horrified by pop culture paganism, saying that it's disrespecting an ancient system of belief, and also that it's ruining the reputation of an already fringe faith.
I'm going to go on with that. God spousal is a very touchy and contentious topic, because what a lot of people don't understand is that God spousal wasn't really practiced in the way we do it here in antiquity. God spousal, as it is professed and proposed on social media, is more or less a reconstruction based on a revision of ancient culture. So to say that there is some line to antiquity, I'm not saying there isn't something there. But to say that somebody who is God spouse to a pop culture entity is just as accredited as somebody who was God spouse to Ishtar in Mesopotamia, that's not got a lot of legs to stand on. And now this isn't to ridicule people. I myself have been God spouse before, and at this point, even though I have dabbled in the idea, let's just say I don't recommend it because, deity divorces are messy. Beside the point. This is something that I feel like is a valid practice so long as we understand that what people are talking about now isn't what they did in ancient times. This is sort of cherry picking ideas from what people did in ancient cultures and sort of rehashing it, if not downright appropriating it, for a current and contemporary time and frame of mind. Do I think God spousal is valid? Yes. Do I think that what people are doing in their God spousals now looks anything like what they did in ancient times? Abso-fucking-lutely not. But I also understand that there is a disconnect, not just from the outside observer to the inside practitioner. But yes, there are definitely a lot of people who are practicing living, breathing, thriving traditions from a long line that are genuinely concerned and appalled by the way that people are showing their God spousal online, by the way that people are representing something that is sacred to these other practitioners, and it looks like it is whimsy. It looks silly. It looks unserious. And it's very difficult to say when you have taken some kind of vows with an ancient deity, and now here comes along Joe Schmo who's saying that they are God spoused to fucking Satoru Gojo. I can understand why that would seem like a slap in the face, but at the same time, I myself have taken up this argument to say, hey, there is a middle ground here. But this, to me, the way it was presented, by the way that this content creator, Funky Frog Bait, said that there are other practitioners who practice this ancient tradition, who are appalled by those who are doing this in this way, not only does it come from a place where, to me, it seems like they've already put themselves in a position of superiority, now it is pointing the eyes from people who are in the community, so other outside observers can set other practitioners against each other. Or it sets up this idea that there already are people who are against one another in the community. And even if that isn't wrong, even if it isn't exactly inaccurate, I feel like it is unfair, because it is saying from somebody who is outside of the witchy and pagan community to observe from the outside point of view and present it misrepresented to others who are on an outside point of view. It's already pitting pagan against pagan, witch against witch, practitioner against practitioner. It's almost as if it is invoking the sanctity and the sacredness of an older tradition in order to turn that against the newer revisionist rendition of that ancient tradition for the sake of condescension. And again, I'm saying condescending a lot because it feels like that is what is going on. It's talking down to. And when it is already being set up that this content creator is talking down to everybody, why placate to the sentiments of others to point that these people over here are silly? Again, it feels to me that this is a topic that this content creator already has an opinion on. Either way, it feels very disingenuous and very biased and misrepresenting the entire thing to people who know nothing about what is actually going on in the community.
Some even say that pop culture pagans are being deceived by trickster spirits that are siphoning their energy. But you can siphon my energy whenever you want. Is a god someone started worshiping in 2019 necessarily less valid than a god someone started worshiping in 100 AD? Are these people spiraling into spiritual psychosis?
Jesus fucking Christ. Now, I'm going to save most of my grievances on the trickster spirit topic for another time, because I feel like I would do better dedicating an entire video to that topic, because in the history of WitchTok, the idea of trickster spirits has come up time and again. An idea that there is an imposter spirit, some kind of parasite or astral entity that is impersonating the deity that you think that you're talking to. And if that was the concern, I wouldn't be too concerned myself. But the way that people use this in discussion and in argument is to discredit the experience of others. It is to cry out and say, your experience isn't real, that's a trickster. Oh, your experience is different than my experience? You must be talking to a trickster spirit. Oh, that's the information that you have? Clearly the deity that you are talking to isn't the deity you think you're talking to. It's contrived nonsense, and the usage of trickster spirits in the conversations in WitchTok historically is nothing more than an excuse to discredit and invalidate the experiences of others. Because if you can undermine the experience of somebody, that experience being the basis in which they are making the content about, then you can discredit their entire platform. Or in the very least, discredit the entire video. Now, the topic of spiritual psychosis winds up coming up in similar instances. However, I feel that when it is brought up, they are far more sinister and, if not sinister, then problematic implications to the way that people wind up utilizing this as a way to discredit others. Now, I believe that there is a lot that isn't understood about spiritual psychosis, because a lot of people, the way that it is utilized in the witchy community is they kind of regard it as a spiritual phenomenon, when in fact spiritual psychosis is a mental health phenomenon. And understanding the difference between the two is incredibly important, because spiritual psychosis isn't a spiritual experience. It is a mental health condition that is a type of psychosis. Now, over here on my laptop, I have pulled up Understanding Psychosis, presented by the National Institute of Mental Health. I'm going to provide a link in the description below, but let's see what it says here. What is psychosis? Psychosis refers to a collection of symptoms that affect the mind where there has been some loss of contact with reality, period. During an episode of psychosis, a person's thoughts and perceptions are disrupted, and they may have difficulty recognizing what is real and what is not. Seems like a fair assessment, but if we scroll down just a little bit, there is a section that says, what are the signs of psychosis? And I'm just going to list off the symptoms. And again, I am picking from this article what is pertinent to the conversation that I'm having here, which is why I'm providing a link to the entire article in the description below. So let's read off some of these symptoms. Suspiciousness, paranoid ideas, or uneasiness with others. Trouble thinking clearly and logically. Withdrawing socially and spending a lot more time alone. Unusual or overly intense ideas, strange feelings, or a lack of feelings. decline in self-care or personal hygiene, disruption of sleep, including difficulty falling asleep and reduced sleep time, difficulty telling reality from fantasy, confused speech or trouble communicating, sudden drop in grades or job performance. And then this continues on. Other symptoms may include, but are not limited to, emotional disruption, anxiety, lack of motivation, and difficulty functioning overall. Now, a lot of these symptoms overlap with the symptoms of other things. I myself, being an autistic person, experience burnout, depression, lethargy, and fatigue. And a lot of these symptoms would come up with that particular situation. I myself am also the host of a DID system, which means that I have quite a bit of childhood trauma that brought that condition to my mental health experience. So I experience insomnia on top of all of this shit. These things, from the outside point of view, can look a lot like other different conditions. From the outside point of view, these symptoms can pop up and look concerning, but if you are not a licensed and trained professional, you are not in a position to be able to tell whether or not somebody else is experiencing psychotic symptoms. And if you are somebody who is seeing another person online and seeing their unusual behavior and seeing that they have psychosis, not only is that unethical, but that also speaks to your ability as a trained professional to actually understand your job and what it entails. It's not your place, whether licensed or otherwise, to be psychoanalyzing individuals and making diagnostic judgment calls when you don't know the person in real life. Something that we need to always keep in mind and remember when navigating and traversing online occult spaces is that this is online occult spaces. More importantly, when it comes to WitchTok being a community on TikTok, this is a social media representation of what people are experiencing. Whether it is a spiritual experience or a mental health experience, you cannot tell from what somebody is portraying on social media. It is social media. And I am going to go this extent and talk about myself. On my social media platform, in the witchy spaces, on TikTok, I have a whole lot of videos where I am reenacting deity interactions, where in my experience, I am recreating conversations that I have had with deities. And as I've said it before, I will say it again. Given that I believe that to some extent I am in communion with some sort of divine force, they're in on it. What you, as the viewer of my content, needs to understand is that I am presenting entertainment with a narrative objective. It doesn't matter if I believe what I am saying. It doesn't matter if I am actually in communion with these deities or not, because I, again, am an entertainer. I also understand that there is a social media presence and a persona. Something that I've referred to in videos either here or on TikTok is the disillusion of social media kayfabe, where there is a suspension of disbelief between the audience and the content creator that we are getting along to get along. There's a suspension of disbelief so the viewer can be entertained by the content. And it's very difficult to portray spiritual experiences online in social media spaces unless we render it down to an art form. I literally said that in a video previous, the one where I'm saying the witch talkers are coming. It's not easy to portray a spiritual experience on social media unless we talk about it and then it sounds crazy. Unless we try to turn it into some sort of artistic representation and then it sounds crazy. But people forget that this is social media. We are talking about things. We are turning it into an art form to express something that we experienced. And this is completely forgotten about, ignored, or left to the wayside when people take it upon themselves to accuse somebody with spiritual psychosis. You don't know what somebody's experiencing in their real life. You don't know what somebody's going through in their real life. You don't know. It is not your place. especially because odds are you are not a licensed, trained psychologist, therapist, or some kind of mental health professional. And if you are, you should understand that it is incredibly unethical to see something that you are seeing online and say that it looks like psychosis. Now here's where I'm going to get a little bit vulnerable. In 2019, I was mismedicated, courtesy of a misdiagnosis in 2018, and I lost most of my 2019 due to legitimate, genuine, clinical spiritual psychosis. It's very difficult to talk about it. It's very difficult to try to explain, because to some extent, I chucked some of those memories out. But it was hell. It was turmoil. I was not in a good place. I was not having a good time. It was not a spiritual experience, and even if there was some inkling of some spiritual messages that were coming through, I needed actual psychological clinical help in order to get it taken care of. And whatever I experienced in that time frame cannot be used in my own spiritual life now. That being said, I am personally invested in this particular conversation to say you're full of shit if you are looking at somebody that you don't know and you think that you can extrapolate that somebody's experiencing a psychotic episode. You are adding to the problem, and this is deeply rooted in an already pre-existing ableist phenomenon where when we don't understand things, we lump it into a mental health box. There's not a lot of room in psychology, in psychotherapy, or in the world outside of online occult spaces for spiritual experience, because from the outside looking in, it sounds and looks a lot like mental health problems. There isn't really an area for people to grow and learn and understand spiritual experiences in a spiritual belief structure that includes and incorporates the very real tangibility of divine and spiritual forces. And this is always a problem that we are going to face, wondering, am I going crazy, or is this a spiritual experience? Which is why there are some important things that we always need to preach to those who are having a spiritual experience or undergoing some kind of spiritual practice. Practice grounding, which includes utilizing your own physical senses to bring you back to the physical world. Also, take some time off from your spiritual practice. Get in touch with the things of the mundane world that you enjoy and can bring back. That way your whole life isn't being consumed by spiritual knowledge, spiritual adages, spiritual communities, and spiritual platitudes. When you start getting invested in all of these things and it becomes all-consuming, it doesn't matter if it's an mental health phenomenon or a spiritual phenomenon. It's already a problem, because if it's becoming all-consuming, you're gonna get lost in the sauce, whether it's spiritual or mental. So when somebody cries out spiritual psychosis, 19 out of 20 times, the person crying out does not give a shit whether or not that person is actually in a good mental health place or not. And if they do, usually it is out of something that they see that they don't understand, or it feels a little hokey, or it feels a little spooky, and they're not understanding it. I'm not saying that there isn't a time or place to be concerned. Concerning behavior is concerning because it's concerning. Problematic behavior is problematic because it's problematic. I'm not saying that we shouldn't address things. I'm not saying that we shouldn't take the time to make space to talk about some of the problems that do arise when somebody is committing to a lifelong spiritual path, whatever that path is. But at the same time, when everything spiritual is lumped into a mental health field, there isn't space made for spiritual experiences, which either is a good thing or a bad thing. But it is not the place of people, strangers online, to be looking at people, strangers online, seeing something that is a social media representation of something that they experienced, whether they're talking about it, reenacting it, turning it into some form of artistic expression. It doesn't matter. You cannot tell from social media if somebody is experiencing psychosis. And this particular thing, crying out psychosis, has become such a problem, become such a detriment that now people who are talking about mediumship in general, people who are talking about paranormal investigation, people who are talking about ghost stories are now being told that they're delusional, that they're suffering with psychosis, and it's not fair. This only says to me that we are not speculating witches. We are looking at anything that we don't understand and don't rightly comprehend and saying that people are crazy in order to discredit them, in order to deplatform them, in order to disrepute them. This should be a much more serious conversation. But by the way that people have led this conversation, something that should be a very serious mental health topic has now become so contrived and so misplaced and so misunderstood that we can't talk about it without somebody needing to get to this point in this level of frustration where I've spent a third of my video talking about it. That right there in that video was fucking bullshit. And I don't care who you are, because there's already a pre-existing problem in the community, in the witchy community, and outside of the community, where people are being accused of psychosis left and right, and what people that aren't a part of the community don't understand is that this is already a problem, a pre-existing problem. So of the 1.58 million subscribers and the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that could potentially see that video, now all of this is misrepresenting the entire thing. What is happening is a surface level understanding of a community that is multicultural, multifaceted, complex, nuanced, with a history of complex topics, discourse, rhetoric, points shared that encompasses multiple different traditions, multiple different schools of thought, multiple different forms of ideas and theories that are being shared and cast around just because somebody is talking about pop culture deities, just because some people are being misrepresentative and ruining the story for everybody else. If you look at the surface of any community, the loudest and the most engaged are going to be what comes up. If you look at the surface level of any community, the most problematic takes wind up surfacing to the top because they are what gets the most engagement. They are the ones that get the most follows, likes, dislikes, comments, stitches, duets. They are at the top because of that algorithmic understanding of engagement. And when you aren't a part of the community and you don't understand the ins and outs and the way that we as a community have tried to make a fine line between this sucks, this sucks, this sucks, these tarot cards are misrepresentative, these things are misconstruing us because this is what people are going to see on the outside looking in. This is what people who don't get it, people that don't practice, are going to misunderstand and then later talk about it, misrepresent. Now, blanket, surface, cursory understandings are now being blanketed across an entire multifaceted community. And it's incredibly a misuse and an inappropriate place to be making a video like this, to be ostracizing and misrepresenting an already misunderstood community to a larger demographic outside of that community. That video is now acting as a filter for others to have a predisposed understanding before they even try to come to understand anything that's going on. And when people like me, my content, when people like that other individual, their content is being singled out, that's now not casting the ire across a community. That is now giving their entire following individuals to seek out and ridicule and do further harm to. This is why videos like this one are a problem. And this is why I would hope that somebody in a position with the level of reach and influence and following that they have would understand that they should do better. I think that this is where I'm going to wind down this video, and suffice it to say, I think I'm done with the reaction portion of the video. I could continue on, but since I've already sat down to watch the video twice before sitting down to film this video, I think that anything that I could say, I've already said. And I could continue on to try to provide more context, and I could try to add more nuance, but I think I've gotten to the point of what drove me to make this video to begin with. Everything that they say in the video either is a fair criticism with unfair jokes, or an unfair criticism with unfair jokes. And what it feels like to me at the end of everything in this video that I've made here so far, it feels like a video that was made for the sake of content, and in the video they get to position themselves as somehow either more understanding or more mature, and there is a whole lot of condescension. And again, I am biased. I am a witch, and I am proud of that. I am a pagan, and I am proud of that. I believe in the very real existence of spiritual and divine forces, and I myself have played into that social media kayfabe where I take leniences with the way that I am presenting information in order to entertain people. But at the same time, I have constantly said, I am an entertainer, not an educator. I am an autistic person, and these are my special interests, which is why I info dump about these topics. I do my best to do the research. I do my best to understand my own cultural, historical, and religious research, so that way I understand the proper context. So when I relay that information to others, I do my best to present that context. And this has gotten me into a lot of arguments and a lot of heated discussions, particularly in regards to the context of Lucifer, the context of Lilith, and the context of the Hades and Persephone marriage story. I've gotten into a lot of arguments, and I have shared a lot of criticisms, and for somebody who technically, at least by association, is a witch talker, WitchTok has given me a lot of grievance, and a lot of my platform is built upon arguing with WitchTok, tearing down WitchTok, introducing what I feel to be common sense or some kind of logic and rationale. That way there is more of a grounded understanding in the spiritual experience that others are having. And this is one of those things. We live in a mundane world. We live in a world that doesn't make space for spiritual experiences. But we also live in a world where social media is not an accurate representation of what people are actually going through and what people are actually experiencing. So when there are videos like this one, it puts people on the chopping block to be ridiculed and put in genuine danger for the sake of views and disagreement. And that's genuinely disheartening. And as somebody who has been a part of the witchy community on TikTok since the middle of 2021, and somebody who has been practicing something spiritual for literally half of my life at this point, it's disheartening to see that there are still people on the outside that go out of their way to mock, ridicule, and misrepresent us. And I'm not sure what to do about it, but I feel like that somebody who is in the position with the platform that I have, this is important commentary to provide in bridging the gap between the understanding of people who aren't in the belief of this and people who are in the belief of this. Because there is a huge gap, a chasm between those who believe and those who don't believe. Those who do believe do not need to make other people believe. Those who don't believe really should think before going out of their way to mock and ridicule people. And I think that's why I'm here. Because it really is a shame that something that could be a potential claim to fame is me making a video like this, and then also having one of my videos being downloaded and used in another content creator's video without my knowledge or consent. And that's why I'm here. The entire thing is a fucking mess, if I'm to be honest. But I feel like something needs to be said. I feel like somebody needs to say something, and I don't know who else would. But that entire video was unnecessary. And there are genuine criticisms that I also share. But the video could have done better. That way other people weren't thrown under the bus. That way entire people's practices and even livelihoods weren't disregarded, disreputed, and criticized unnecessarily simply because that person didn't quite understand what was going on. And I think that's where I'm going to tie it off. If you're still here, thank you for listening. And as always, until next time, take care and much love.